You're listening to the Monday Night Community Show with Daniel on BRFM.
This is the Daniel Monday Night Community Show on demand through YouTube. Thank you very much for choosing to listen to us through this method. If you'd like to keep up to date with when I add new interviews, then subscribe to this channel. As always, it's good to see you back here in the studio after our summer out and about interviews.
Oh, it's good to be back, Daniel. Good to see you again.
Well, I was hoping you could sort of start off by letting us know what's been happening since we last spoke.
Yeah, that's right. It's actually been quite a while when you think about it. Actually, July the 2nd, when you visited both of our allotment sites. You also come along visited at the annual show, but unfortunately I couldn't be there because my partner Jan, she had just had a major operation, so I was at home with her. So yeah, 2nd of July since we spoke last. So what's been happening since? Basically, the society and the allotments have been plodding along well, no serious problems. But the two big events really were the Silver Spade competition and the annual show. The Silver Spade competition, well, that's our in-house competition, you might say, and it's for the plot that receives the most points when judged by an official independent judge. The plots are marked out of 100 points for various categories, things like the first impression, conditions and variety of plants, the use of recycling, general layout and tidiness, amongst other things. And since its inception a few years ago, the Silver Spade, which is one for each site, one for Medway Road and one for Richmond Street, has become a much sought-after prize. Remembering as well, apart from the honour or the skill in winning the spade itself, there's a £25 voucher for each winner and a £10 voucher for the runners-up. So this year, well, the judge came along and she was very impressed with the standard of the plots, and several she even classed as county standard, which was quite a good thing to hear. And at both sites, the results were really, really close. There was only 1 point between the winner and the runner-up at Richmond Street, Nursery Close. So the winner at Medway Road, that was Gillian Forbes and Julia Upwards, and they got 88 points. And the second place went to Tom Firth. Now, Tom's a fairly newcomer to allotmentarian, and he'd really put a lot of time in, and he actually came second with 86 points. So that was a good year's work for him. At Richmond Street and Nursery Close, well, the points were much closer. The winners this year was Sharon Mathis, and she got 95 points. And second place was Bernie Turger, and that was 94 points. So everybody really did very well as regards as the Silver Spade. Then the other big event, well, that's our annual event, our annual flower and vegetable show. It's the main event of the year, as we'd probably tell you about each year. And it's where it gives the chance to all our allotmenteers to not only show off their skills at growing vegetables, but also their skills in cookery, jams and pickles making, flower arranging, and also their expertise in photography and handicrafts. There are about 100 plus categories, and they include fruits, vegetables, the plants and all their various categories, flowers, floral arts, crafts and handicrafts, cookery, photography, and also we have a junior section as well. Once again, the judging is done by accredited and independent judges, and there are several certificates and trophies up for grabs. So what about this year? Well, it was a real wow. It was the best show that we've ever had. Superb display of vegetables, flowers and crafts, and all presented by the Horticultural Society members. And then with 353 visitors passing through the door, was it our best ever? We certainly think it was, because within memory of the committee and the allotmenteers, it's well exceeded any previous years. Of course, the big difference was holding it at Stone's Garden Centre and combining it with their fun day on the Sunday, which made for a very, very busy bank holiday weekend. All the jams and honeys and pickles were sold out, and the auction of produce on the final afternoon that collected £109. And the tea and cake stall, extremely busy, and they sold out of most bits and pieces there as well. At the end of the 2 days, the Mayor and the Mayoress presented the certificates and the trophies and the cups. But what everyone was waiting for really this year was the announcement of the winner of the Grand Challenge Cup. And that cup is for the overall winner, for the person who's gained most points in all vegetable and flower sections. It's been won by our own John Lewis for, well, as long as I can remember. And last year, though, there was a contender, and a very serious contender, and that was Alan Hollywell. And he lost out last year to John by the slimmest of margins. So this year, all eyes were on the Society's secretary as he announced that the winner this year is Alan Hollywell. Yeah, well done, Alan. You've done it at last, and everybody was pleased for you, more so John Lewis. So I just want to finish by quickly saying thank you to Matthew for allowing us to hold the society show at his garden centre, and for the generosity in hiring out the marquee for us. It was a great help to us this year, and to his staff who all chipped in together with their hard work to make a nice display at the front and all around the marquee. Very, very successful weekend, enjoyed by everybody.
I wonder if you could let us know what you can be doing on the allotment plot at this sort of time of year.
Yeah, right. Well, most of the things you've grown have probably been harvested now. Maybe the late things like Brussels sprouts and parsnips, things like that. Although they're a little bit better with a little bit of frost on them. And as the weather seems to be getting that little bit colder, and it looks like we're going to get a few frosts, you could actually wait a little bit longer. So it really depends now this time of the year what you actually want to do over the winter. Jan and I, we don't grow vegetables over the winter, so once the last few bits and pieces have been harvested, the plot can then be rested. We were quite lucky that a very kind neighbour in the allotment here with a large rotavator has just turned over the ground for us, so I mean, nearly for us it's job done until the spring. But if you want to get into growing vegetables for the winter period, things like early broad beans can go in now. Winter onions, garlic cloves, they could go in now. And your spring cabbages, and also things like winter lettuce, they could go in now. Perhaps should have been sown already, but if not, no, it's not too late for them to go in now. We've had a little bit of rain. Things are quite moist, so yeah, they should be all right. But December into January, don't think there's really any pressing jobs to do. But there's always the maintenance. That's always a good time now. So if you haven't got round to turning the ground, you really need to get it turned over and aerated before the ground gets too cloggy and heavy. And it's a time to repair and replace any damaged stakes or fencing. Tidy up the shed, it's a good chance for that now. And clean and oil and sharpen equipment so that when it's left over the winter period, not much chance of rust and damage. If you have planted some winter vegetables earlier and they are already showing a few signs of growing, just give them that little bit of protection from wind and serious rain damage. But as I say, this time of the month now, or this time of the year, just depends what you actually want to do.
We're joined with Malcolm from the Sheppey Horticultural Society. So what can we be doing in the garden at the time of year?
Yes, I suppose really the garden now, it's a case of protection, really. With the cold weather arriving, and according to the weather forecast, it definitely is going to arrive. So it's the time really to think about insulating the greenhouse. Bubble wrap, and that's a good insulator. It allows plenty of light from a weak sun now, but it's also fairly economical because in the spring, just wrap it up and dry it and store for use again the following year. Plants that you've got in pots, they need now wrapping in fleece, especially round the pot itself. The frosts can damage even the most hardy plants, so a good time to start fleecing. Any outside water hoses and pipes, they need to be lagged to prevent freezing. It's always best if there's some sort of insulator inside somehow to prevent water getting into the pipes as well. A good time to clear leaves and moss off of paths and steps to avoid them getting dangerously slippery. Cover your pond. If you've got a pond in the garden, cover it to prevent any debris falling in, because what this will do, it will pollute the water, and it won't help the fish if you've got fish in your pond. So those plants that you have got outside in pots and in containers of any sort, probably might think about now moving that inside, perhaps inside the greenhouse, or perhaps you move stuff into a conservatory, I don't know. And even though they are in the greenhouse, still wrap them with that fleece. As with the allotment, tidy up the tools, clean, sharpen and oil the tools. Make sure they're stored away tidily. So the grass itself, hopefully, it's sort of the growth should have slowed down. Perhaps you're looking out the window and thinking, yeah, well, mine hasn't. Yeah, I think you're probably right, because mine hasn't either. So if you can get a mow in before it gets too wet, don't want to mow when it's too wet. And also, it's quite a good time to aerate and fill any holes now. But try and avoid treading on the grass too much, especially if it's wet. You don't want to sort of be breaking down the grass and getting muddy patches. Still a bit of time to put in your spring flowering bulbs. If you want to plan that out and get those in, but if you want a bit of colour in the garden now, maybe in baskets or again in pots, things like your winter pansies and your cyclamens. And don't forget over the winter period to keep deadheading, and this will help you with a lovely colourful display throughout the winter. The other thing in the garden that we do, and many gardeners do I know, is providing feeds for the birds, and you need to keep that up. They rely on you a little bit, so keep that up for the winter, and especially water. Make sure that they've still got water, and just check that hasn't frozen over. So once all the jobs are done, and you're sitting indoors, and you've probably still got itchy fingers for the garden, well, now's the time to get your catalogues out and start planning everything that you're going to do next year.
Oh, no, just wanted to talk a little bit about autumn leaves.
Yes, the annual problem, because if you've got a tree or trees near your plot or near your garden, then you're going to get leaves, unless, of course, it's a deciduous or evergreen tree. So just a few real ideas on coping with leaves and what to do with them. If you only get a few leaves, perhaps a scattering of sorts, let the worms take them down into the soil. They do, honest. You can rake up the leaves and pile them up into a pile, and let that be the start of your new compost heap. Don't put them, though, on your existing compost heap, because the compost there is already rotting down and ready for use. So you can bag them up in black sacks or empty compost bags. Make a few holes in the bags and then leave them to one side to rot down naturally. You can then add them to the compost heap next year. You can use a good pile of leaves for mulch. Use it as mulch to spread over the plot, particularly flower beds, to help keep in the warmth over the winter periods. And if you have lots and lots to rake up and burn, it will depend, obviously, what sort of garden and what sort of area you're in. So beware, because there'll be smoke when they're wet. So just respect your neighbours. And if you do have a fire, before you light it up, remember to check for any animals that might have taken up residence. Really physically lift up and turn the pile that you've got, because some of them are very good at hiding right in the middle. So just remember that before you light up at all. Very easy to do, but don't use petrol or paraffin. Can be extremely dangerous, because you probably know that it's not just the petrol or paraffin itself that catches fire, it's the fumes if they're floating about. So be very, very careful. And I suppose as a last resort, if you can't do any of those bits and pieces, bag them up and take them down the tip.
And I know you next wanted to go with some sort of Christmas hints.
Yes. Now that Christmas time is coming along, there are lots of bits and pieces that people tend to do. So just one or two little bits of hints and advice, really. One of the big favourite at Christmas time is poinsettias. Usually associated with Mexico, but they are grown in Holland, and they're also grown here in Britain. The rule here really is to always buy the British grown plant. They will be a bit more expensive, but they are used to our climate, and they will not have travelled as far as those coming from abroad, and so they should last you quite a bit longer. Once you've got your poinsettia, keep feeding it a good feed once a week to keep them healthy. What I would say is just be aware of poinsettias that are sold in supermarkets or on garage forecourts. They are usually foreign grown, and the plants, you have to remember, have probably been removed from their growing environment quite early. They've travelled a long way, and then they've stored until the time that they came out for sale. So if you buy one of these, just wrap it very carefully and take care of it on its journey to your home, because they damage very, very easily. And really the first thing that you should do is give them a really good feed straight away. Indoor plants and indoor colour for Christmas. Well, there are various types of plants like the Christmas rose, cyclamens, hyacinths that all give you a nice bit of colour over the winter and the Christmas period. But don't put them in a room where the temperature varies and particularly doesn't drop drastically, particularly overnight. Like your conservatory, for example, always seem to be a nice light place to put these plants, but they don't do good in a big change of temperature. And also, to add for a bit of colour, really, don't forget your good old holly and mistletoe with their colourful berries. They look good laced around everywhere at Christmas time. Christmas trees, well, almost everybody has a Christmas tree. So if you've kept from other years, or perhaps you buy a rooted Christmas tree, don't be too tempted to bring it in too early. Make sure it is kept well watered. And those of us that resisted the temptation to get an artificial tree, well, still buy a cut Christmas tree. And there are several varieties, really, when you look round. The one that's used the most is the Nordman. It's a very, very popular tree because they are non-drop needles. Or, should I say, they last a lot longer before they drop. Picapungen is another quite popular variety, and that also is a pretty good stayer as well. And the standard Christmas tree, the basic tree, the standard tree, it's the Amorcia, but they are the quickest to drop their needles. Once again, with a cut tree, don't be tempted to bring it indoors too early. I know the thing these days seems to be about the beginning of December or even earlier. Let's put the tree up and let's get going. But the longer that you can keep it outdoors, the longer it's going to last. And once indoors and in the warmth, that's when the needles will soon start dropping. Even if you're told that those needles won't drop, trust me, they will. So when you buy a cut tree, try and get one with quite a long length of trunk below the bottom branches. And then what you need to do is cut about 3 or 4 inches off that bottom trunk and put it into a holder that will allow you to give it plenty of water. Keeping that water and keeping it watered so it can draw it up the trunk, this will extend the tree's life for quite a long while, and it will help it hold on to its needles much longer, and then hopefully you'll have a tree for a long period over Christmas.
And I know we did this last year just for sort of a little bit of fun and sort of pop as well. Sort of unusual Christmas gifts you've come along or come across, I should say.
Yeah, it's a few silly little bits and pieces when you look on the internet at all these different sites that sell different novelties and presents, and some are amusing, some are too silly, but these are just a few that I saw, and I thought, we'll mention them, and probably be forgotten about immediately. But as usual with all these things, there's a vast array of gardeners' hand soaps and hand protection creams and back and muscle rubs for sore backs. They probably might come in handy, and of course bath soaks and bits and pieces. But for a range of novelty ideas, as a few bits and pieces. For example, how about a rain gauge? It's in the shape of a watering can, and it's made from cast iron. So it's quite a quirky decoration, but it also collects and measures the amount of rainfall. £18.95 on the internet. Anybody's interested in the weather as well as the garden. A simple Stubbs allotment mug for the keen gardener. A white mug, and it's engraved with "I'd rather be on my allotment." It's a gift box set, and it's £8.50. Handy if you want to take your mug of tea out in the garden, or take stuff for making a tea or a coffee down the allotment plot. And then you can have a personalised book based on Enid Blyton's stories. It's called Five Lose Dad in the Garden Centre, and it uses Dad's name and a few messages, and it's personalised for the one person, and that's $14.99. Once again, you can find that on the internet. I saw a book. It's quite an amusing book, actually. It's The Garden Owner's Survival Guide by Martin Baxendale, and it's quite amusing, really. It's perfect for everyday gardener, and it tells. One idea was that he'd noticed that snails eat the weeds and that, so he's on about having pegs in the lawn and tying a bit of string to the snails and letting them walk round and chomp your garden for your grass for you. But so rather silly things like that, but it is quite an amusing read, and that was $3.99. You can also have, if you want to spend the money, if you're into big spenders and that, you can have it very expensive, but a personalised print of your garden. It's a hand-drawn illustration from a picture of your garden, and each illustration is signed by a London-based illustrator, Brian E. Fripp, and each one is signed by the artist. As I said, expensive. It's £135 from notonthehighstreet.com. Perhaps not. And finally, for me, and this is my big no-no, although it was rated 5-star by people who brought it, and it was a Ninja Gnome garden light. His eyes light up bright, and it's £20. No, not for me. So just a little bit of silliness there, but a few ideas if you want to do something silly for the gardener in your family.
No, they always fascinate me sometimes, those catalogues that come through the doors as well. You have a good old look through.
Oh no, they're so funny. And you think, do people buy them? Perhaps they do. I don't know. And
before you go, Malcolm, I was hoping you could sort of go over if anyone's interested in becoming a member or renting their own allotment plot or any sort of useful contact details or info, you could go over that for us.
Yeah, well, it's really good the way that allotmenteering is taking off these days, and allotments used to be associated with the older generations, but it's nice to see that a lot of younger people now want to get involved. So vacancies, actually at Richmond Street, there are really no plots available just at this moment. There are a few vacancies at our Medway Road site. Now, anyone interested, they should contact our secretary, and that's Mr. Brian Williams, and he's on 0785 12 53 603. Or alternatively, if you on a Sunday morning pop into one of our shops, either at Richmond Street or Medway Road, they're open on Sunday mornings between 9 and 12 midday, and someone in there will always help you with what vacancies there are. And if you specifically want to go to Richmond Street, then put your name down on the waiting list. One bit of advice or one little hint is that in January the annual fees are due, and that's normally the time that people give up their allotments if they're going to. So do keep in touch during January. Pop in and just ask, are there any available? And just a little word on the costs. If you do get an allotment for what we call a 10-rod plot, that's currently £46.50 a year, and that comprises of £25 for your ground rent, £20 for water, and £1.50 is your society membership. The water is our biggest cost, really. We use a lot of water, but many allotment sites don't have water at all. So we're quite lucky in that in that way. But of course, we do have to charge. If a 10-rod plot is a bit big, and sometimes newcomers might be better to go for a plot half that size or 5-rod size, and that's normally £24 per year. And that's £12.50 for your ground rent, £10 for water, and again your £1.50 society membership. There are a few other plots of varying sizes, and the rates alter accordingly. But like I say, keep in touch, particularly in January, and you may well be lucky.
Well, Mark, as always, it's great to have you here in the studio. Thank you very much once again for coming along.
It's a pleasure, Daniel, and thank you. And a bit early, I know, but my last chance just to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and chat to you again in the new year.
And you, Malcolm, it'll be good to speak to you in the new year. That is Malcolm from the Sheppey Horticultural Society, all as part of our regular gardening and allotment plot slot.